What's up, challengers? Zach here. We got a GLC deck profile for you guys. This GLC deck profile is for the Poison Dark deck, a deck that's very annoying because it turns off cards like Ryan and Teammates, since with Poison, the idea is to try and knock out between turns. To start the deck profile off, we have the Scolipede line. The Scolipede's kind of nice for Dark because it's got 170 HP, which is a lot for Dark, but it also has its primary attack, Dastardly Jab. And Dastardly Jab is for Dark and the colorless. Put damage counters on your opponent's active Pokemon until its HP is 10. And since you're playing a deck that kind of is trying to leverage Poison, it'll knock out everything in the game between turns. Next, we have the Whirlipede Venipede lines, which is just the Venoshock attacker, and then just the 70 HP Venipede. Next cards that we have are the Galarian Weezing. So this is a very good card for disrupting your opponent. Makes it so that it gives you the extra turn or two you need to kind of set up by turning off their abilities. So as you may have found out through the games, for the POV, it did turn off my Soul Rock and Lunatone very early, so I wasn't able to discard energies early to get my board state going. And plus, it's the Severe Poison is a 4 damage poison, so with any of the other poison modifiers that you'll see in the deck, it could do 6 damage between turns on Poison. The next cards we'll talk about are the Poison Enablers. So first is Garbodor. Its primary use is for its ability Poisonous Puddle. Once during your turn, if a stadium is in play, you may make your opponent's active Pokemon poisoned. Obviously, it's to enable all the between kill turns, you need one of your enablers to poison something. The other enabler being the Brute Bonnet with its Toxic Powder. Once during your turn, if this Pokemon has an Ancient Booster Energy Capsule attached, you may make both the active Pokemon poisoned. And so these are the main 2 enablers for Poison. There are other cards that you can play to also do Poison or just get the Poison off with your attacks, like with the Poison Sting, the Severe Poison, or the Petrarun have poisonous attacks, and so do some of your other basic Pokemon. And then for support Pokemon, or further support if you want to call it, we have the Trade Liepard. It's a kind of a given for any Dark deck to play Trade, but the difference here is that we're playing a 60 HP Purloin, which has Invite Evil. And Invite Evil is nice because you get to search your deck for 3 Dark Pokemon and put them into your hand. So it doesn't have to be basics, it can be anything. So if you're trying to set up your board state, get the evolutions like a Whirlipede out, or just try and get anything you want, it gives you that flexibility. And it's also kind of just a nice target for trying to retreat out, set up your board, and then maybe try to recover it later if it gets knocked out. And then Petrarun is another poison damage modifier. So it has Toxic Subjugation. As long as this Pokemon is in the active spot, put 5 more damage counters on your opponent's poison Pokemon. So one of the main ideas from this deck is, let's say you poison them with like the Weezing, and they return knockout. Well, with the Severe Poison, you do 4 plus another 5, so you're actually doing 9 damage between turns. So this will work. Since they knock out, you push active first, and then the between turns step happens. They'll take additional damage from Petrarun's poison. And we have some other attackers. I say attackers and support Pokemon. We have the Toxapeck, which has a Venoshock, so if they're poisoned, they take 130. It's nice not having these numbers that go all the way up to 140 or 160, because again, the idea is to do enough damage so that poison takes the knockout. We play a card like Yveltal because both of its attacks are very good, actually, and it's a free retreater. The first one is Derail, so for 1 Dark for 30, it discards a special energy, so this would not disrupt the Okidogis or any other deck that has the special energies. It also has Fighting Resistance, which can come in useful, and then if you want to trap a poisoned Pokemon in the active, it has the Clutch to prevent retreating. And then Sableye being a 1 energy attacker that can do 90 damage if they're afflicted by a special condition, which could include the sleep from his Night Eyes attack. And we're back with supporters. So to quickly go through the supporters, we play our classic draw supporters, Lily being a very good card in the early state of the game, Iono being the only form of hand disruption in this deck, which is something to possibly take note of. The next 2 cards we have are your Pokemon and Energy Search cards. So Hilda being only able to search for the evolution Pokemon, but get any kind of energy. And then Piers being able to search for any Dark Pokemon, including basics, and getting an energy card. We play the 2 boss effect cards, Gladion to fetch the missing piece from the prizes, Roseanne's backup to ensure things like the Ancient Booster Energy Capsule or your special energy kind of comes back into play. It's also very useful for getting your stadium options back. It's just an all-around card that does 3 or 4 different effects, which is pretty useful. Ball Guy being for the number of balls that we have in this deck. Probably, was it 5 balls in this deck? So it's like a form of deck thinning almost, but there's just a lot of useful things that you can get with the balls. Next we have our stadium search cards. Obviously, since Garbodor is something that requires a stadium, you want to kind of pay attention to making the stadium cards come off. And so that's our stadium search for Garbodor, and the special energies. There's some things like capture energy, I think, that are in the deck to make sure that you can kind of pluck the right Pokemon you want from the deck, and also having options of Artisan capture energy, Artisan capture energy, or this one also being the Floatstone option if you need it. Lana Zade's just so you can, I think probably primarily to get the 1 or 2 pieces that you had to get rid of early, or just recoup an attacker late in the game, and Arvin being classically useful for like a TM Evo play. Now we have our item cards. Like we had mentioned with the ball guy, we play 5 balls. Not much need to be said here. The only thing I've noticed for heavy ball, there are 4 targets in this deck. It's the Galarian Weezing, the Whirlipede, the Scolipede, and the Brute Bonnet. So there's pretty decent options. Especially for evolutions, you get a decent amount of evolutions with just the heavy ball for setting up. The rest is pretty self-explanatory. The evolutions, so Evo Incense, Pokepad, the versatility, the Buddy Poppin for all the 70 HP or less Pokemon. Trainer's Mail just to dig a little bit deeper. And then Hypnotoxic Laser is a card that's not played very often. Your opponent's active Pokemon is now poison. Flip a coin. If heads, the opponent's active Pokemon is also asleep. So this is another poison enabling card, which is pretty useful, especially if you can't get the right pieces going, or you can't get your evolution off early enough to try and get the early turn donks. And then we have Dark Patch being a classic dark card to just get energy from the drop to attach to a Pokemon. Probably something that's most useful for making sure your Scolipede attack can get off right away. VS Seeker, Escape Rope, Rescue Stretcher, Professor's Letter, very obvious item cards included in most decks. All right, now we have our tools and stadium cards. First up are our classic retreat tools. There's only the 4 Pokemon I mentioned that were targets for heavy ball that Floatstone's really needed, so all the other Pokemon can be met with air balloons. TM Evos to make sure that you kind of get yourself set up. In my mind anyway, being able to set up further while you have the Galarian Weezing out is pretty nice, and then the Ancient Booster Energy Capsule was something that was needed as for one of your poison enablers. And then for the stadiums, we have the Artisan. We'll talk about the Artisan first, classic Pokemon search, but then we have our 2 poison stadiums. And so both of these do essentially the same thing. The Verbank City has put 2 more damage counters on poison Pokemon, both yours and your opponent's. And then Perilous Jungle, which is during Pokemon checkup, put 2 more damage counters on each poisoned non-dark Pokemon. So this one you can take more damage from poisoning yourself with a Brute Bonnet, and then the Perilous Jungle will prevent that additional poison damage. Now for energies, we just play 7 dark, and then the special energy targets for like a Guzmaha is your hiding energy, which acts like another retreating option card, and then capture energy to help set up potential donks with the poison dark deck. All right, now to talk about the donk. So something that poison gets to do, or I guess dark gets to do in general, are early turn donks. And so one of the classic strategies or classic setups for the poison donk is leveraging cards like Colress Tenacity and Guzmahala. So Colress Tenacity and Guzmahala allow you to search for your energy and stadium cards to at least pluck the Petrarunt and Brute Bonnet out of the deck, depending, like, agnostic of what your starting Pokemon is. And then you can use the capture energy to retreat into the Petrarunt card. Cards like Arvin are also other forms of setup for getting your Brute Bonnet and Petrarunt combo into play. But the idea would be you attach the capture energy to whatever your basic Pokemon is, get the Petrarunt, you can retreat, play the Artisan, get the Brute Bonnet, and with the Guzmahala, since you pluck the energy booster capsule, you do the poison, you do 6 damage poison dunk. And so if they don't have a response to retreat anything from the rip, that's 120 on the first before it comes back to you, and that's a dunk. And other options too, if you already have the ideal setup, you can play a Perilous Jungle to even get that 60 up to 80. So it's pretty annoying for the donk. So if you know you're playing poison, you may want to make sure that you get a backup Pokemon. There's some, once in a while, not as often in GLC anyway, it's harder for them to do it on the very first turn, since you do kind of require your stadium or your supporters to get the full setup. But just be wary of this option with the Poison Donk deck. Another cool part about the Poison Dark deck is that when you attack with your Weezing, and the Pokemon's still like poisoned, you do still have at least the option, but with searching through Arvin or Guz Mahal, to try and set up your board further. So in addition to having the ability lock and the severe poison, so the damage is still taking on their side of the board, you can further go into your evolutions for setting up. And then final cards for maybe your special mentions is that Raihan's a card that was notably not included in the list. It's something that is probably needed to go in this list to make sure that the 2 energy attack from like a Scolipede, or at least trying to recoup energies late in the game, is needed. But the other reason for pulling this out in particular is that Poison denies this card, and being able to deny cards like Raihan is very disruptive to your opponent's strategy. Enhanced Hammer is like additional hate against the Okidogis. This deck has a lot of fighting weakness, so as you may have seen through the video, my 70 HP attack from Okidogi was swinging for weakness against the Weezing to knock it out. And so even though he turned its ability off, it was still not enough. And then a new card that's coming out in this, what is this, Chaos Rising set, is a new attacker for Poison Dark archetype with the Quillfish. The Quillfish has the poison point. If this Pokemon is in the active spot and is damaged by an attack, your opponent's Pokemon is poisoned, so that's nice, another enabler. And then it's a 1 energy dark attack that does 80. So if they're poisoned, it does the 30 plus 50 if they're poisoned. So it can be nice against certain, I guess, there are a couple 60 HP Pokemon on Psychic side that are weak, so you might be able to get just
really good
cheeky
in a Psychic
dunks.
matchup.
Yeah, just because it's a 1 energy.
160.
Yeah. And so there's a lot of cool things that you can do with the new Quillfish that's coming out in Chaos Rising.
Yeah, like so against the Psychic Pokemon that are weak to Psychic, that's where the poison takes over, and you hit them for 80, and then poison will usually do the rest, and Psychic aren't very healthy either.
Yeah, that's the other point to make sure that we re-emphasize. So like even like this 80 number, it may seem low, but it's nice because it's low. It makes it so that the poison's always going to get the knockout between turns. The Sableye was 90, and so the numbers for the Sableyes with the Soul Rock and Lunatone have the 110 HP. And so the Sableye was doing 90. You get the poison between turns, and then to finish it off, you need a Verbank or the Perilous Jungle to do the 110. So you would be able to knock out Soul Rock between turns with a Sableye, and then not quite there with the Quillfish, but still just nice to have as an attacking option, especially if you open up, and it's a quick way to get poison enabled for your other attackers. So like if you lead the Quillfish, you would be able to go on the Sableye the turn after, because they're poisoned. They've taken the additional poison, so maybe it's a little easier to get things into range.
Yeah, this guy, he survives like the Fan Rotom attacks, the Soul Rock attacks, the normal turn 1 stuff. He'll survive it and start the poison train. So like when they end their turn, they'll already have 10 on them, plus the 80, which is 90, and then you play the Stadium on your turn is 110.
That's pretty good against some of the fighting matchups. I guess the Psychic, some of those guys are a little beefier, but if you're hitting for weakness, at least that's pretty nice. But Psychic is so weird with being weak to Psychic.
Yeah.
A lot of the older cards anyway. I guess the newer cards, they're mostly weak to Dark now, not Dark or Steel nowadays, I guess.
Yeah, either Dark or Steel, depending on if it's a fairy.
Making it a little bit more fair, I guess. Anyways, guys, that's the deck profile for the Poison Dark deck. If you like the deck profile, don't forget to hit the like button. If you have other requests for certain decks, let me know. I have the Okidogi deck that went up before this, and I don't know, it might be time to start revisiting certain types. I think we've hit most of the other types.
Double attack grass?
Well, that was the first deck that we did, but maybe revisit it. And it's something I've been thinking about rebuilding anyway. Just it's the only version of grass that I really like. But that's it for the deck profile. And as always, guys, thanks for watching.